Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and today we are going to be taking a trip, going on a bit of an adventure. This week saw the release of Project Hail Mary, which was based on a book by Andrew Weir. He is the author of The Martian, the best-selling book The Martian, and also the best-selling book Project Hail Mary. And without getting into spoilers per se, or necessarily, there there were some signs, some none too subtle symbolism in the film, and the overarching narrative of the film, which frankly you can get most of the gist of it just from the trailer. But the movie is the story of humanity making a last-ditch effort to save itself. There is what appears to be what they call an astrophage, some sort of microorganism that is essentially blotting out the sun. It 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 feeds off of the solar radiation, and this phage, this essentially virus. Well, actually, yeah, phage. Is it a virus? Yeah, it's technically a virus. Um, has spread throughout the galaxy and is infecting stars throughout the galaxy, including our sun. And the government essentially is recruiting scientists and, in particular, biologists to try to figure out what this thing is, uh, how it reproduces, and if they can figure out a way how to stop it. So, in the process of undertaking this effort to stop this astrophage, this interstellar virus from um, causing catastrophic global cooling. Ryan Gosling, his character, whose name is Grace, is recruited into trying to help. And through a series of circumstances, he finds himself waking up on a ship far from Earth, on approach to the only star in the galaxy that appears to be unaffected by the astrophage. And he is sent on this mission to determine what it is about this star that is preventing the astrophage from taking it over, from blotting it out, from consuming it. And if you've watched any of the trailers for the film or if you've read the book, you know that in the course of events, he encounters an alien life form. And a good chunk of the film is a first contact story where this human being alone out in space has to learn how to communicate with an organism which is truly unknown to humanity. The there's a the only familiarity really is the fact that it appears to be made out of stone, and that it has limbs and what sort of function as rudimentary hands, but it has 5 limbs and no discernible face, no discernible uh, you know way to emote or communicate visually in any way that a human being would recognize. Because even with animals here on earth, most animals have eyes, for instance, or something resembling a face. And there's that old adage, the eyes are the windows to the soul, and all this kind of stuff. That's about the extent I think that it's necessary to get into the story. I don't think we have to go beyond what is seen in the trailer, barring a few exceptions here or there, which I might interject. For instance, I believe her name is Mueller, the German scientist or administrator who is responsible for the program. She also appears. She's very prominent in the film, and she's very prominent in the trailer. She's the one heading up the rescue mission, the whole endeavor. It is unfortunate that the vast majority of people who are seeing this movie are being so moved by it. It is, and they don't realize, they don't grasp the underlying esoteric metaphysical foundations of that affinity that they have to this narrative, especially when it's there in the title. It's there in the title and in the name of the protagonist. His name is Grace. It's the first line of the Hail Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with you. Of course, this meaning is easily diverted, is easily whitewashed, secularized in the mind of the audience, because in football, American football, there is something known as the Hail Mary pass. That is the last ditch effort. It is the moonshot, the impossible, you know, again, last ditch effort. It's the last hurrah, it's the last chance, the last hope. And that's referred to in American football as the Hail Mary or the Hail Mary pass. And so this is the name that they give to Project Hail Mary because sending this ship, out 11 years through space to this other star in another solar system to try to figure out why it's unaffected by the astrophage is really Earth's last ditch effort. It's the Hail Mary pass, right? But what you also know from the trailer, if you've seen it, or from the book if you've read it, or from the film if you've watched it, obviously, that upon awakening from his induced coma, Grace, encounters an alien ship, and that alien life form appears to be made out of stone, but it has no eyes. It doesn't see light visually, but it processes the frequencies, the vibrations of light audibly, and it sees in 3 dimensions. In other words, it's like sonar. It 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 is able to discern its environment by the reflected vibrations around it. So in other words, this stone being, this stone creature, its entire universe, its entire reality, and its perception of everything comes down to vibration, to sound, essentially, to frequency and vibration. And what comes to mind is the lyrics to the song Amazing Grace. Because the very first line of Amazing Grace is uh, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Grace is the one who is, at several times in the film, obviously, in peril, and he's a wretch. There's no other way to describe his character. He's a loser. He was once a great scientist, but he took a position which got him denounced and essentially canceled from the world of science. And so he is like a fallen character. And in fact, when we first meet him, when we first encounter him out in space, he awakens from his coma with amnesia. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know why he's there. He is truly a wretch. He is adrift in space, much like the character, much like the protagonist of the song Amazing Grace, who is lost at sea. Because that's the story of Amazing Grace. The one who wrote the song wrote it while lost at sea in a terrible storm, and the words spontaneously came to him, and it was like his prayer, his mantra, his 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 plea to the divine feminine, to the divine mother. His Hail Mary pass was, right, Amazing Grace. And I can Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found, was blind, but now I see. And, you know, we encounter this story framed in this way, where the character, the protagonist, is called Grace, and the story is called Project Hail Mary. And the purpose of that project, the purpose of the mission, is to find a way to stop the blight that is blotting out the sun, that is blocking the light, consuming the light. And the one who appears to assist, to partake in this mission, is this character that Grace ends up naming Rocky, a character with 5 limbs but no face, no eyes, but 5 limbs, who's made of stone. Who sees the world through frequency and vibration, through sound, that is reflected in the very first line of Amazing Grace, that grace is sound. And Rocky works with sound, and how he communicates and how he sees the universe factors into the unfolding of the story. This is an allegory which is hardly being masked in any way. It is overt. It is in our face. The stone, as you may or may not be aware, is the philosophical stone, is the cornerstone, the cubic stone, the 9-sided cubic stone of Yesod on the tree of life, upon which rests the 2 pillars of the tree of life and the whole edifice of the temple. The 9-sided cubic stone of Yesod is the 4th dimension, and it is stone. The stone, the rock, Petar, PTR, upon which I will build my church, Jesus says. That's Peter. But that rock, that foundation stone, the cubic stone, the stone that was rejected by the builders but becomes the keystone of the Temple of Solomon, the temple of the solar man, and the philosophical stone which transmutes the lead of ego into the gold of the human soul. All of these talk about a stone, a rock upon which we can build our church, which is that great project, that great enterprise that seeks to clear out the blight within us, that blots out the sun, that consumes the light and brings about darkness, the darkness that hangs over our head, the darkness of our soul, the dark night of the soul. And that phage, that mind virus, that astrovirus or astrophage in the world of the movie is in us, that darkness, those egos, those demons, those sins of our defects and vices that seek to consume our light and blot out the sun within us and bring about that cold-hearted, mechanical um, extinction of the soul by extinguishing the light. And the book by Andy Weir and the film based on the book clearly shows how a man, if he is to overcome the astrophage, that which is blotting out the sun and consuming the light, bringing about the extinguishing of light and the extinction of humankind, must find an ally with this being who is a rock. It is also interesting that the character of Grace, the human character, he has no significant other. He was married, but he's since divorced. But Rocky, interestingly enough, does have a mate. And they actually have a conversation about the fact that, Rocky has a mate. This clearly associates mating with this being who's made out of a rock. So Rocky and mating are significant. They are related. And of course, esoterically, Yesod, the cubic stone, right, the philosophical stone that transmutes lead into gold, the lead of ego into the gold in the human soul, that's sexual energy. That's the fourth dimensional vital energy. It's the sexual force. This impossible task, this impossible mission that this fellow Grace is sent on. And let it be said that the head of the mission sends him on this essentially suicide mission. Not altogether with his consent. In other words, he doesn't want to go. When he starts off, he's not much of a hero, right? He's a wretch. But the amazing grace, the sound, the sweet sound, and the companionship, the insight and the input of this other being, this rock, helps the character of Grace transform over the course of the story, over the course of the mission. All this, serves as a reminder to us that we are all on our own project, Hail Mary. No matter who we are, no matter what we're doing in our life, every time we face a challenge of any kind, any sort of test, any sort of trial, any sort of ordeal of any kind, whatever it may be in terms of obstacles or individuals, relationships, tragedies, whatever the case may be, we can watch a film like Project Hail Mary and put into context the allegory that we too face many of the trials and tribulations of our life seemingly alone. And yet, everything is a Project Hail Mary. Because our Divine Mother, the divine feminine force, is there to see to it that we succeed in our mission. That no matter how wretched we are, no matter how much of a wretch we are, that we can be saved. And no matter how lost we are, we can be found. No matter how blind we are, we can be made to see. But we have to allow for that process to take place. We have to make an effort to make contact, to befriend, to respect that being of stone within us. That also wants to see an end to the blight, that also wants to see the astrophage be put under control, and wants to work with us to eradicate that darkness which blots out the light within us, which causes our corruption, that brings the darkness into our lives. Just as Rocky is there in that star system, to study the astrophage and to try to figure out what's going on and to try to find a solution to save his planet. So Rocky and Grace, they share this common goal. And you might not think of it this way, you might not realize it, but your higher self, your innermost being, right, longs for you to succeed. Your success is God's number one priority. Your innermost intimate Christ, your innermost essence of God within, that God mind, that God power within you. Its first priority is you, your success, your fulfillment, the fulfillment of your purpose, of your meaning for being. And to that end, your innermost intimate Christ has a wholly dedicated and devoted aspect. And that is your individual Divine Mother, your individual Hail Mary, who is wholly devoted to us, entirely concentrated and focused on our success, on our fulfillment, on our joy, on our happiness. Now, that doesn't mean that the love of our Divine Mother doesn't come with its share of severity. Just like in Project Hail Mary, the film, we see a good deal of tough love being dished out by the head of the program, that Mueller character. And I'm not even sure if I have her name right, but she's the one who heads the program, and she has she just has that disposition, right? That classic German stoic disposition, and so she has plenty of tough love to dish out. And so too does our Divine Mother put us in circumstances and has us face scenarios and even tragedies in order that we may rise to the challenge and face the blight, the astrophage, which infects us and blots out our light. But too often we forget. We forget our Divine Mother. We take it for granted when things work out. We think it's because we were clever or lucky, or we planned correctly. And then when things go wrong, we might play the victim, say we were unlucky, or that we were cursed, or that bad timing, or that we were treated unfairly, or whatever the case may be. There's a point in the film where Grace discover something, and in the course of events, he remembers Rocky. And the film takes a turn and heads off in a new direction, quite literally. As Grace remembers Rocky. It's a small little point, but one worthwhile mentioning, that the project is not truly over and it's not truly successful until and unless Grace remembers this element, this aspect of his project. So too we forget our Divine Mother at our own peril. We forget that she's there for us, because we must avail ourselves to her help. In the course of our lives, in the course of the pursuit of the path, the pursuit of our awakening and self-realization, we will be tempted to go in many different directions, especially when we face hardships, and especially when we face what appear to be impossible odds or impossible challenges. We will be tempted to give up. We'll be tempted to throw in the towel, or tempted to keep bashing our head up against the wall over and over and over again, failing again and again and again and again, but determined that I'm going to figure this out. But if you recall, when you were a child, a very, very young child, recall that you received what you needed from your mother. You didn't figure it out. You didn't make it happen. You may have cried, as all children do, as all babies do. And in the Bible, Jesus says, ask and ye shall receive. But you didn't make it happen. The love of a mother for a child is like that. And the love of the Divine Mother for you is like that. She is there for you, whether you know it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not. But her capacity to help you depends greatly on your willingness to let her, and your attitude of openness, of receptivity to receive her divine blessings. Because if you go through your day, day after day, with a great deal of stress and anxiety, imparting, telling yourself like a mantra, "I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. I." And at no point do you ever say, "I'm not qualified. I need help. I can't do this on my own." And you make a solemn, humble appeal to the amazing grace of your divine mother. And it may not be immediate, but your prayers will be answered, even if it means simply that your mind is put at rest and you find yourself at a strange at ease, at a strange acceptance of whatever it is that you're facing right now, whatever it is you're dealing with. That's another theme of the film, accepting, allowing, but accepting the situation for what it is. When things are a one-way trip, right? For instance, going on a spaceship, you know, I won't say halfway across the galaxy, but to another solar system that's 11 light years away, with the film takes place in a near future, so it's not like humanity has developed warp drives and is gallivanting through space everywhere. No, it's like the technology they develop to do this project, to run this mission, they develop just exclusively for this mission. So everything, including even the engines, are untested on the spaceship. Everything is essentially a prototype. And there's a great line from the movie where he goes, "Is that safe?" And she replies, she goes, "Nothing about this mission is safe." Um, it's it's a Hail Mary pass. That's why they call it the Hail Mary pass, because it's basically, it's going to take a miracle. And that's another way that we can comprehend all of this, is that if you are in need of a miracle in your life, then you are in need of praying to your divine mother. You don't have to pray to Mary, although you can. It's as effective. You can visualize Mary, or you can visualize um, Isis, Athena, or any female entity of a divine nature, and close your eyes and pray to them. But know that you're praying to your individual divine mother, your individual essence of that divine feminine force at work in your life, and in truth at work in everyone's life, but your individual expression of that knows you and what you need specifically, and is focused on you and your life and your success specifically. Because in a very real sense, she is your mother, the same way that your innermost intimate Christ is your father. And the metaphysical order of things has been thus organized such that your higher self, the feminine aspect of your higher self, really only has you to focus on. And what he is here to accomplish through you depends very greatly on your success, on your ability to overcome that which obstructs, obscures, twists, tempts, and corrupts us. Benjamin says, ask your mother in Gnostic texts can be understood as turning to divine wisdom, Sophia, the spiritual source within us. When you're asking for a miracle, it's not just about looking outward, but going inward, connecting with that deeper divine presence. The idea is that miracles begin when we align with that inner wisdom, where faith, insight, and transformation already exist. I can't disagree with any of that. I can go along with just about all of that. The key here is that all of nature, all of manifest reality is feminine. And therefore, all experience and all knowledge born of experience is feminine. That's the Sophia that the Gnostics talk about and that you're mentioning here. Because that is born of experience of in manifest reality. And because all of manifest reality is the body of the divine feminine, then that which is born of that must likewise be feminine. The knowledge of that, the experiential knowledge of that, the gnosis is feminine. And that's why Sophia means wisdom. It's And in truth, we can say that our innermost divine mother is that collective wisdom within us, which is what, Benjamin is essentially saying here. The point is that a mother knows, right? A mother knows intuitively, instinctively what their child needs. And it is wisdom. It is not intellectual knowledge. It's not book knowledge. It's embodied knowledge, and embodied knowledge is wisdom. And it is that wisdom which becomes the substrate, that the essence, the seed can germinate. So that self-knowledge, gnosis, can spring forth, can sprout and can bloom. that the abstract, absolute abstract spirit of selflessness can come to know itself, it needs a field and it needs others in order to give of itself. And it needs a self that it can give from, and it needs others, other selves that it can give to. And when we assume a position of radical humility, our devotion to our Divine Mother, you see, is an opportunity for us to express our own individual essence of selflessness. And the only way to grow, the only way to become, the only way to be is to express. Without expression, you're not being. I am that I am. Well, what am I? I must be able to express that. And it's in the expression of selflessness that we can know the nature of God, the essence within us. And so, devotion to our Divine Mother is an opportunity for us to express that in the same way that a man's devotion to his wife or a woman's devotion to her husband is an opportunity for us to express that. And for parents, their devotion to their children, and for children's devotion to their parents. You see, devotion is an expression of selflessness. Devotion, by practically by definition, means to put others before yourself. And to put others above yourself. To put the concerns, the greater good is an expression that we've all heard. Well, to uphold the greater good is an act of devotion. It's an act of devotion to the spirit of goodness, which is God, the spirit of selflessness, which puts everyone and everything ahead of itself. The spirit of selflessness pours itself into all it creates. And through the divine feminine aspect, supports and nurtures those seeds, those essences of itself that it has poured into every single atom in the universe, that they may reach fruition, that they may grow and develop and germinate and sprout and grow and bloom and express themselves in a unique and individual way. And that the whole of manifest reality is there encouraging that development, that growth, the achievement of that potential. And that whole manifest reality is feminine. And you might say, well, hang on a second. I have had nothing but obstacles and pain and suffering and people getting in my way and everything I've tried, I've failed, or you know, like, this is the dilemma that the ego faces, that we mortals face, is coming to terms with uh, suffering, and coming to terms with difficulties, challenges, tests, trials, ordeals that we face, tribulations, the turbulence, the obstructions, the people standing in our way, standing between us and our dreams, and all the things that we have to overcome in order to fulfill our destiny. If we have the right mental attitude, if we approach life in the right spirit, as one approaches a game or a sport or any type of pastime that involves challenge and overcoming adversity, overcoming those challenges in order to achieve some goal. It might seem trite, but video games are an excellent example of this. You don't play video games because they're easy. You play them because they're hard. And if a video game is too easy, you observe how quickly you get bored of it. Now, if the video game is too hard, you might rage quit, you might walk away because it's too hard, because we don't have the time or the patience or the dexterity or whatever to devote to a video game, of all things, to master a video game, right? So there's a sweet spot between too easy and too hard, where it's challenging but not overwhelming. But it's difficult enough that it poses a serious challenge, and that there is reward in overcoming the challenge in and of itself. It's rewarding facing those challenges and overcoming those challenges. And it's especially rewarding, it's especially fulfilling, it's especially satisfying when you get to the next level, right? When you're stuck on a boss, and you're stuck on that boss for, I don't know, who knows how long. But then when you finally beat that boss and you finally beat that level and you get to the next level, boy, just how does that feel? How does that make you feel when you overcome such a challenge? And this sort of satisfaction, this sort of fulfillment, if we pay attention to that and we focus on that, and we contextualize that in the spirit of what that represents, the spirit of the Alm of Life, the analogous ultimate methodology, that expanding spiral, where every level of advancement comes built on the previous levels, and that I've described countless times. You should all be very well versed in this, that you have to descend before you can ascend on that spiral. So every time you face a new challenge, it makes you feel like you're a beginner again, because now you're facing life, or whatever it is you're facing, at a whole new level of difficulty. And now all of your skills, all of your faculties, all of your abilities are being challenged in a way that you've never been challenged before. And this is true whether you're lifting weights in the gym and you're going on another plate, you're putting another plate on the bar, or you're taking the pin on the machine and you're putting it one step lower, or one step lower on the machine means one step more weight, right? So one step lower is actually one step higher, one step more weight. But the point is the same. These all represent advances, and there's a satisfaction, there's a fulfillment that comes to lifting that weight with that extra plate on the bar, or running that mile in one less minute, or whatever it is that you're doing. So the adversity, the challenge, makes us better. And in that sense, and there's it it makes us wiser, makes us more skilled, makes us more experienced, and it makes us stronger in spirit. That spirit that I talk about, approaching life as a game, is strengthened when we overcome new challenges. And more importantly, when we turn to our innermost for guidance and insight and help and strength in overcoming the challenges that we face. Because at the end of the day, it is our innermost being who is our player, who is the one here playing the game. And we mortals are just the character in the game. We're just the mortal vessel. We're the 3D spacesuit here in the 3D matrix. But that matrix and that suit and everything that we face in the game of life, that's all being orchestrated and fine-tuned by our Divine Mother for our sake and for the sake of our innermost player. It's built into the system. It is built into how this all unfolds and how this all works. And the difficulty level is finely tuned to our ability, our capacity to overcome the challenges set at that difficulty. None of us are ever given a challenge that is beyond our ability to overcome, with the caveat that we mortals don't figure it out and don't overcome it. We surrender. We allow ourselves to be moved. We allow ourselves to be informed. We allow our higher self, our innermost player, to overcome those challenges for us and through us and with our cooperation. And what Project Hail Mary, in its storytelling and in its title and in its character names and in many other aspects, allegorizes and reminds us that that assistance, that help, first and foremost, comes delivered to us and through us and around us by virtue of our individual Divine Mother. That it is grace. It is her grace that allows us to succeed in our work, in our mission, and that our individual Divine Mother is deserving of our remembrance, is deserving of our praise and our devotion, which is why her prayer is Hail Mary. We pray the Our Father, but then we have the Hail Mary. It's very interesting that feminists and, postmodern revisionists will say things like the Catholic Church is a anachronistic, patriarchal structure that is obsolete, and so on and so forth. And yet the Lord's Prayer is Our Father, but the prayer to the Divine Mother in Catholicism is Hail Mary. We don't pray the Hail Father. We don't. We pray the Our Father. But we pray the Hail Mary. Oh, and we also have another little prayer called the Glory Be, right? The Glory Be to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Spirit. So we pray to the Trinity and the Holy Spirit, which is really the Divine Feminine anyway. But regardless, the throughout history, there's that expression, beside every great man stood a great woman. And it is absolutely true that for most men, when they stand up to receive awards or lifetime achievement awards or whatever the case may be, very often in their acceptance speech, one of the first people they thank or the last person they thank, as in the most important person they thank, is their wife, their spouse. And if you were to do a survey of acceptance speeches, you will find the vast majority, a man's spouse is mentioned at the beginning of the speech or at the end of the speech, or both, because those are the two most prominent positions in any expression of gratitude. They bookend the acceptance speech because they're the two positions of honor, first and last. The first position being the most prominent, and the last position being the most prominent. This is the person that I want you to remember from this speech, because they're the ones who matter most. I saved the best for last, in other words. And it's a shame that postmodernism and feminism has sought to systematically deprive women of the joy and the fulfillment that comes from becoming living embodiments of the divine feminine. This is why so many women aren't having children these days, and why they are there are such skewed and twisted ideas that unfortunately women have towards marriage and what they expect from their husbands and so on, and there's so much expectation, but very little talk of responsibility or of, traditional roles, traditional, or, heaven forbid, archetypal, essential, natural roles for women. And it's a shame because if you speak to um, women who have embraced those roles, they don't suffer from mental illness nearly to the same degree as, modern feminist women with their careers and looking out for themselves and everything else, right? I mean, like so many women these days, and especially in younger generations, they suffer tremendously from emotional, psychological problems, precisely because there's a mismatch between what society says they should be doing and what they feel deep down they long to do, what would bring them fulfillment and happiness, is being denied to them. And men are being demasculinated and being robbed of opportunity. And so you have this disaster, this compounding disaster. Because in the same way that what is most fulfilling to a man, what is most fulfilling to a man is to self-actualize, to be all that he can be. That's, I know that that's a slogan that the US Army used, right? As a recruitment slogan. It was a very powerful slogan because there is nothing a man wants more than to be all that he can be. It's called self-actualization. It's at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But that's also spiritually self-realization, to fulfill our purpose and our destiny and our purpose for being, to be that. Well, we can't do that without the divine feminine. And practically speaking, we men very often can't do it without someone standing beside us, supporting us along the way. And you will find that just as there is nothing more fulfilling to a man than to be all that he can be, you will find that many women will say that there is nothing more fulfilling in their life than to watch their husband and to be there and to support their husband becoming all that they could be. And that in doing so, they felt that they achieved that same fulfillment, that same level of self-actualization, that they became all that they could be because they had this individual or this family or this shared enterprise, this shared project to nurture and see to fruition. It's like so many women feel so powerfully that they want to have a child. Well, what is that if not the feminine need, the feminine longing, the feminine drive to nurture and to bring to fruition, to bring to, right, to term, and to bring into this world new life, but then beyond that, to nurture and raise and teach and support and then watch that life that you brought into the world go off to seek their fame and fortune and become successful in the world. And to know that you had a hand in that you played a critical role in the fulfillment of a soul, in the fulfillment of a being and their purpose in life. There is nothing more fulfilling to a woman than that. And if if there is anything related to self-improvement or individual success or individual power or accumulation of wealth or for a woman, it's only because deep down she is there to accumulate and create all of that in order to nurture and birth and help others and support others in their self-actualization. Because that is the nature of the feminine. And you can call it, you can accuse me of being cliche and so on, and but the facts are the facts, right? You cannot deny the nesting instinct of the feminine in nature, right? This is undeniable. You cannot deny that we call it Mother Nature for a reason. You cannot deny the the sheer volume of species born out of this incessant longing to create and to nurture and to see new life come about and flourish. This abundance that they talk about in the new age is a flourishing. Well, what do you think makes it possible for life to flourish thus, if not the feminine aspect of the Holy Spirit? If not that nurturing, giving, supporting energy? And the union of that masculine and feminine energy, that spark, that seed, which longs to be realized, which longs to be actualized, which longs to be brought into this world. That spark, that seed, that that enterprise, that mission, that purpose that drives the masculine to be the womb and the nest and the support and the foundation and the energy and everything else that gives birth, that brings that seed to fruition and watches it bloom and flourish in the world. That is that feminine. And it's, you find it in the very nomenclature of human being. Hume is earth, the earthen matrix. When I say earth, we don't just mean the earth. I mean earth, soil, hume, that which you plant into. It's the earthen matrix of organic materials and water and minerals, and it's this substrate, it's this medium, it's this stuff, but it's a matrix. And the second part is manas, divine mind. It's the spark, it's the essence, it's the seed. That's the masculine. And it's that manas that divine spark, that essence that is planted inside of that Hume and that embeds itself in that earthen matrix we have within us, that spark, that seed of divine mind within this earthen matrix of our Hume, which is feminine, right? Our nature. Hume, manas, and being. The capacity to be, as in to be or not to be, but to be, we must be born. We must be supported. We must grow. To be requires the cooperation and the union of this essence, this spark, this manas, and that Hume. And that Hume, its place, its purpose is to be that matrix, that substrate, that nurturing, nourishing stuff of life in which can be born the beingness of divine mind, right? The idea that is brought to fruition or manifestation by virtue of that Hume, that matrix. Now, speaking of manifestation, we, of course, 2 weeks ago, were talking about manifesting and the right way to do affirmations. And because today we're talking about the divine feminine, that rock. Yes, we're talking about the Hume, the earthen matrix, and everything else, but we also have to talk about the divine feminine as an energy, as a force. And that force is Yesod, the vital body, the foundational energy of all of nature. And the application of that energy is the creative force. It is sex. It is the sexual force. Because when we talk about a seed being planted into a matrix, it's not a stretch of the imagination, right? We are all adults here, right? We all know about the birds and the bees, and we all know that in the act of procreation, we know the contribution that the man makes to that process and the work performed by the woman, what the woman brings to the table. A man puts a drop in the womb, right? In the uterus. And the rest is up to the woman, right? It's very much like planting a seed in the soil, right? There's the manas, there's the essence, there's the seed, and then everything else is this Hume in human. And so too in the act of procreation, because let's face it, the act of procreation, of creating another human being, does not require 100 million sperm. It requires only one sperm, one. And that is the definition of immaculate conception. An act of copulation in which one sperm makes the journey from the man, from the gonads, to the ovum and the uterus. One. That's immaculate conception. It's chosen by the Holy Spirit. which is where we get the story in the Bible about the Holy Spirit was responsible for the conception of Mary, and that she was a virgin. But that's the problem with people's understanding or misunderstanding of the Bible. The word virgin doesn't mean someone who doesn't have sex. The word virgin means someone who did not waste the sexual force, someone who did not fornicate. Because fornication doesn't mean sex. Fornication means ejaculation. Fornication means orgasm. Fornication means expulsion of the sexual energy. Immaculate means clean, without blemish. So immaculate conception is simply the sexual act, but clean. No spilling, no wasting. That's immaculate conception. And there are many Catholics who experience immaculate conception on a regular basis if they're well, to some degree or another. But there are many Catholics who do not use birth control, but who use the Catholic Church's pull-out method of birth control, and yet they have many children. But the man has never ejaculated inside of his wife, and yet she has borne him many children. Well, each and every one of those conceptions were immaculate, because despite not ejaculating, obviously, at least one sperm made the journey during the act and fertilized the egg inside the woman. And this is well known. This is well documented. In fact, I remember being in high school and being taught sex ed, and despite the fact that I was in a Catholic high school, people said, I mean, it was made clear that the pull-out method of birth control is not an effective method of birth control, and that many teenagers had quote unwanted pregnancies because they thought that they could safely copulate as long as the man pulled out in time, to use the Catholic nomenclature there, the pull-out method of birth control. So the creative force, the creative energy, is the Divine Mother within us. Just as all of manifest reality, there's no matter in the universe. That's an illusion. Everything is energy. And everything in manifest reality is feminine. So all of that energy is feminine. And that is the creative energy. It requires but the spark of manas, the spark of divine mind, to fecundate it, to shape it, to manifest with it and through it. And that is why you have the practices of manifesting and that we talked about 2 weeks ago. But we are literally working and shaping the energy of the divine feminine. And so it is always important to remember that and be cognizant of that and respect that and revere that the sexual energy is sacred. Sex is sacred. Our Divine Mother is sacred. The universe is sacred. And that manifesting your desires, manifesting a Ferrari or whatever, just because you want it, is a violation of your divine mother, as is wasting the sexual force, spilling the seed, spilling the sexual energy. It is an inversion of the divine feminine. It is making. This is why we have in the Bible the dichotomy between the virgin and the whore. You make of your divine mother the whore of Babylon, that which causes the Tower of Babel to fall. And it's also important to note that if you spill the sexual energy, if you waste the energy of your divine mother on frivolous desires, be it lust or any other number of egos or manifesting your desires, either way, you are depleting yourself of the creative force that you have to work with to manifest what you need for true fulfillment in your life. Because we have to accept that there's a metaphysical science involved here, and that you can't be spending frivolously with your left hand, then expect to have the funds necessary to buy what you need with your right hand. Right? If people talk about energy vampires, and people who come and they drain you of your life force, but then the many people who complain about that will turn around and fornicate, will turn around and spend their sexual energy frivolously on desires and pastimes that are just an energy drain in and of themselves. Oh, but they'll complain about energy vampires, but they won't recognize the energy vampires within those egos, like lust and pride and greed and gluttony and everything else inside of them. They'll do drugs, they'll do, whatever. Oh, but they're so concerned about energy vampires, draining them of their energy. So it is a concern, our energy being drained, but rest assured that we don't have to worry about so much about entities outside of us draining our energy. First and foremost, most of our energy drainage comes from within. We drain our own energy. People who fornicate, who masturbate, who watch pornography, who play video games incessantly, or they doom scroll on the internet all day, or TikTok, or they binge watch Netflix, and just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. The ways in which we frivolously just abuse our divine mother, abuse her energy, just waste it. And then people are surprised when things don't work out for them, or when they find they need energy to meditate, they can't do it, or they need energy to do practices, but they can't muster up the energy, the motivation to do their to meditate, or to do their other practices, or what have you. It's not like we have an unlimited source of energy within us. This is not true. And even if we did, it's wholly inappropriate to think of ourselves as being entitled to using unlimited amounts of energy for our own pleasure. This is exactly the way certain, elites who suffer terribly live their lives, and why they grow old so quickly. It's why you can always tell someone who's just abusing their sexual energy by how quickly they age. They don't have that vitality. They don't have the joie de vivre. They don't have it's they're being drained from within, and you can see it in their face. And that's why so many in Hollywood, for instance, have to do their Botox and everything, try to puff up their face and try to, like, get some glow back in their face. Well, they're doing that artificially by putting in botulism, right? Botox, pumping their face full of bacteria in the hopes that their face will look alive again. So I just thought that, I've been looking forward to watching this film, Project Hail Mary. Like I say, it's not a perfect film by any means, but it's an enjoyable film, and it has its moving moments. Um, so it's entertaining, and it's wholesome in that sense. It's not a film of violence or sex or crime or killing, or it's not that kind of film, right? It's a hero's journey of a reluctant hero, a reluctant protagonist who finds, not only within himself but within the example of a rock out in space on the other side of the galaxy, they find, by working together, the means to overcome this blight that's blocking out the sun, and breathe new life into the earth and into themselves. And it's a positive, heartwarming, encouraging story. But behind it all, just like behind me right now, in the image behind me, is Hail Mary, is Amazing Grace, is the rock, the cubic stone upon which rests the edifice of the temple, right? So, and the sound, the vibration, the energy, and the what the power that is within us, the only force that exists inside of us with the capacity to eliminate the blight and restore the light within us. That's the Divine Mother. That's what Rocky brings to the table, and what the Project Hail Mary is all about. That's why it had to be called Project Hail Mary, and why the protagonist has to be called Grace, and why his partner in crime, his part, that he meets, is the rock, and how all these symbols come together. Project Hail Mary is about the alchemy and the transmutation, and the elimination of ego, and the restoration of the light within us, the salvation of a human being. But Project Hail Mary plays out not only in microcosm on the ship between Grace and Rocky, but it's playing out not just in macrocosm on the planets of, I can't remember Rocky's planet's name. I want to say Adrenian, or Adrian, or Adrenian, or whatever. Anyway, Rocky's planet, and then there's Earth, Grace's planet. So it's playing out in macrocosm, but it's also playing out in the megalocosmos, right? In the whole of the universe, right? The entire galaxy is infected by this astrophage. So it's playing out on a cosmic level. But the solution, the answer happens in microcosm. And that's another beautiful aspect of it. Is that we are the universe, we are the world, and we are the galaxy, and we are the universe in microcosm. And so there are no macro solutions, there are only micro solutions. And each one of us is a project Hail Mary. And all of our undertakings are a project Hail Mary. And that the solution is always to overcome the blight and allow the light to shine through. Where there was darkness, now there is light. That's the transubstantiation. That's the alchemical transmutation of the lead of ego into the gold of the human soul, the solar bodies, right? The solar man, the temple of Solomon. Solomon is solar man, the Christified man, the awakened one, the enlightened one, the Christified one. So all of the goodwill that people have towards this film, they all feel what I've been talking about for nearly 2 hours. They all feel it. It's deep down, it's inside of them. But to make it conscious, right? That's is what it is. Benjamin says, what's your perspective on the potential health benefits of ejaculation, particularly in relation to reducing the risk of prostate cancer? Um, this is only necessary if you do not practice pranayama. So cancer is an energetic disease, yes. If you do not circulate the sexual force, the sexual energy through the body, if you do not circulate the prana, it will become stagnant and putrefied, and it will attract negative entities who feed on it. And in time, that can cause prostate cancer or other cancers in and around the groin. But this does not require ejaculation. This does not require masturbation, because masturbation creates its own problems. Because remember, what you're describing here, you're talking about materialist science and allopathic healthcare. They're only looking at physical physical symptoms, and they do not know that cancer is an energetic disease, and they do not realize that the very act of masturbation and ejaculation may help with something like prostate cancer, but may lead to another type of cancer, because you're feeding lust. And lust, that desire, can go and migrate to any part of the human psyche, can go to the brain, can go to the heart, can go anywhere, and can start manifesting as tumors, because you can't masturbate without lust. You can't feed that ego without doing that. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. But it's entirely unnecessary if you spend 5 to 15 minutes a day doing pranayama first thing in the morning. And especially if you're married, you practice white tantra with your wife. Then you're transmuting that sexual force and you're utilizing that sexual energy in a positive, upright way. Then you will not suffer any cancer. So it's just the materialist allopathic medicines way of rationalizing and justifying by giving a so-called, benefit to that. Because there's lots of people that have come to me over the years saying, "Oh, but the medical profession says this, and they say this is healthy and that's healthy, and it's really healthy." And I even my kung fu sifu, used to say how healthy it is. And well, there are many practices that result in strength in the physical body that are spiritually and metaphysically detrimental, but they can result in what appears to be positive physical results. There are many black practices that people use to even heal the body, but black magic is still black magic. And there's also blood magic, which is again utilizing the prana um, in a negative way. And then you've heard about things like adrenochrome and elites bathing in the blood of virgins and so on and so forth. And then, just look at what the Aztecs and the Mayans did with their human sacrifices. They were desperately trying to get the crops. The crops were failing, and they were desperately trying to rejuvenate the soil with the prana of the human sacrifices. They were pouring blood back into the earth in a desperate attempt to breathe life back into the earth. And to some degree, they had some success, but it was entirely overshadowed by the fact that they were slaughtering people in the thousands and the tens of thousands. So everything's on a balance, right? And of course, because it's allopathic healthcare that is saying that ejaculating is healthy and is good for you, they don't have the metaphysical scientific knowledge to counterbalance their materialist physical medical opinion. Uh, Gnostic Christian bishop says supernatural thinking or belief is poison to a mind. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely true. Now, what I'm curious about, Gnostic Christian bishop, is to what you are replying to, or what you want us to apply this statement to, because it is absolutely true. But I haven't shared anything related to supernatural thinking or belief with you, except for the black magic stuff, right? But that's also not belief. That's not thinking. That's not belief. That's based on metaphysical science. Unfortunately, there is there is a positive metaphysical science and there's a negative application of metaphysical science. I mean, there is a reason why there is an abortion clinic on every street corner in the United States. Okay, there's a reason why. Because at the fall of every civilization, child sacrifice becomes normalized. And there's a reason why that the trafficking in children is rampant all over the world. That reason has nothing to do with supernatural thinking or belief. It has everything to do with metaphysical science and the exploitation and abuse of that metaphysical scientific knowledge for the sake of desire, for the sake of ego, out of fear, out of lust for power, out of a lust for more life, for longevity, for long life. And people know that last year I began the year talking about gurus and these gurus and their longevity gurus. And there's an entire obsession online on YouTube of longevity gurus, talking about, living longer and so on and so forth. Well, the uber elite and around the world, I mean, they take this to, extremes of a supernatural nature. But the poison in the mind doesn't come from the belief. The belief comes from the poison in the mind, from the egos, from the desire that's already there. The fear of death, the desire to live forever, like these crazy transhumanists that think that they're going to download their consciousness into an AI or into a robot, and that they're going to live forever in a simulated reality. That, by the way, is why they're building all of these server farms. They don't talk about it in those terms, but that's what it is. It's all transhumanism. It's the final end game in the Black Lodge's game plan for humanity, for enslaving and controlling humanity. The Matrix is a documentary. It's just that it's a document. It's a documentary set in the past about some point in the future that the dark forces who are attempting to take complete control and enslave humanity have planned for us. Right? This is not belief. This is an extrapolation. These are artistic expressions, poetic expressions, and visualizations through art, because art mirrors life, of the metaphysical realities of the war between heaven and hell for the souls of humanity. Right? There is metaphysical science behind that war. There is value to the consciousness and the energy inherent to monads, which is another word for soul, divine soul. Right? Monad is the divine vehicle, divine vessel, in the same way that this physical body is the physical vessel. So we could call that soul. And mechanical nature, I mean, we just know this, like from even the Catholic priests who perform exorcisms, right? They deal with demonic possession, maybe not every day, but that's their job as an exorcist. They deal with that on a regular basis, demonic possession. And I often say, what does every machine require to exist, to function? If an energy ceases to be supplied, if a machine ceases to be supplied energy, it stops. If a machine stops, it dies. Essentially, it cannot function without a constant supply of energy. And we know from our so-called smartphones, and we know from our pets, from our children, and from all manner of mechanical nature, that they crave attention. We know from Hollywood, from people who crave fame, that there's a mechanical element that desires attention. Me, pay attention to me. Look at me, look at what I'm doing. And your cell phone, that's constantly sending you what? Notifications. Right? Yeah, pick me up, look at me, I have something to show you, I have something to tell you. Why? Because consciousness is a kind of energy. Consciousness, attention for a machine gives it purpose, gives it meaning. And the energy gives it life. Right? So energy gives a machine the ability to be, to run, to exist, to live. And attention gives a machine a reason to be, meaning and purpose to be, because somebody's paying attention to me, to what I'm doing. Consciousness and sexual energy. These are the two things that demons want to possess when they possess someone. And that's what all of the egos, all of our what we call sins or egos or nafs or psychological aggregates or mental malware, that's what they all want. And by the way, this fact, it's a metaphysical scientific fact. It's not a belief. It's not supernatural thinking. This fact is what is allegorized in every single fairy tale, in every single mythology, and every other story we have ever read, where the beautiful maiden is kidnapped and held captive in the tower, in the dungeon, in the deep dark forest, and she's held captive and she's put to sleep by the evil witch, or she's held captive by the fire breathing dragon, or she's held in the tower by the evil wizard. It doesn't matter. It's all the same allegory. It's all the same metaphysical truth being allegorized in different ways, because psyche is feminine. The sexual force is feminine and the consciousness is feminine. How do we know the consciousness is feminine? Because awareness, consciousness receives. And when an expression, when manas, divine mind of God, is expressing itself in the universe, and we are conscious and aware of it, that feminine consciousness receives the manas, the expression of divine mind, and in that union of that masculine and feminine, we get an experience. That is the X that is in sex. That experience is born. When manas, an expression of divine mind, of God, is received in consciousness, that manas is like a seed, like a spark. That moment impregnates our consciousness, and experience is born, and wisdom is born of that experience. That is Sophia. So consciousness is like a womb. Consciousness is feminine. And the sexual force is feminine, that energy is feminine. And so that is what constitutes our psyche, our sexual force and our consciousness. And so when that gets possessed, right, that's the maiden being put to sleep. The consciousness gets put to sleep and the maiden gets kidnapped and taken into the dungeon or into the tower. And the hero must then go and save the maiden. That's the heroic journey of a spiritual aspirant who seeks to release the consciousness from the grip of egos and release the sexual force from the mechanical elements that are enslaving it within us. So again, it's another Project Hail Mary, right? It's just a different orientation of that same story that we've been telling for thousands of years. But now in Project Hail Mary, it's a modern telling. It's a science fiction telling, not a fantasy telling, not a fairy tale, not a mythology. It's science fiction. And so we have all of the symbols and allegories, and everything is like inverted, and it's all out there, and it's all mechanized, and it's all scientific and technological, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because nowadays you can't tell a story of a brave hero going to save the maiden because, ooh, that's not politically correct anymore because of feminism. That's misogynist, right? That's patriarchal, because nobody seems to know or understand how to read between the lines or how to read allegorically anymore. People only seem to be able to take things literally. And that's a great tragedy for truth, because truth has never been conveyed that way. Truth has always relied on analogy, on symbolism, on parable. Read the Bible, for God's sake. Read how Jesus taught. Jesus taught in parable, right? And look at the great masters of the Renaissance and the high art that we've produced for hundreds and thousands of years. And those timeless universal stories, that's Sophia, that wisdom that is relayed, that moves you from within, right? When you hear someone singing Amazing Grace, and you are moved by the lyrics, and you're moved by the music, it's not your intellect that is moving you thus. It is not your rational mind that is moving you thus. Right? This has nothing to do with belief or spiritual thinking. When you listen to Amazing Grace, it's not spiritual thinking that moves you. It's the truth. It's metaphysical, scientific truth that's moving. You're being moved on a level that materialist science can't even begin to measure, let alone understand, let alone explain. Benjamin says, do the egos, or what some may refer to as negative influences, seek to take hold of our consciousness because it represents our true source of value? I think I answered this, but let me take another crack at it. Remember when I said that a machine can't exist if it has no energy to run, if it has no power? So a machine needs power. And I mentioned that it needs purpose, it needs meaning. And a machine has no meaning in and of itself, right? A hammer, think about it in terms of a hammer. A hammer lying there on the table. You look at it, you know what it is, but it doesn't know what it is. It has no life, it's lifeless, and it has no purpose because it's just sitting there. It's hardly a purpose. And if nobody was looking at it, it wouldn't exist. We know this from quantum physics. It's called the observer effect. Something only crystallizes when it is observed. Now, What that means is only observers exist. That which is not observed doesn't exist. And that which is observed is only exists so long as it is observed. So imagine an existence where in order to exist, you must take these two vital forms. You must steal consciousness in one of two ways. Either you steal attention, you steal focus, and you get the observers to look at you in order so that you may exist, or you possess the observer and you gain the capacity of being an observer by proxy, by having possessed consciousness. This is demonic possession. And now the mechanical being can exist by virtue of the observer inside of it. Because in a very real metaphysical scientific sense, there is no universe. There is no universe out there. And that the only thing that exists is the observer. It's the only thing that's real. So naturally, and the nature of that observer is it's the absolute abstract essence of selflessness. And what it's observing is its nature. It needs to observe itself. It needs to know what selflessness is. And for that, it has to create an unlimited, infinite number of others who can receive selflessness, that can be observed, that the reception of that selflessness can be observed and can be known. But in a universe of binary duality, if you have selflessness, then it follows that you will have selfishness. The antithesis of selflessness. The self, the I, the ego. And where the nature of the no self, the nature of selflessness is to give, the antithesis of the I, the self, is to take. And the self wants to be, despite the fact that it doesn't exist. In the same way that selflessness has no self. But in order for it to know itself, it has to create, it must It must be able to witness the antithesis, and it must be able to witness selflessness defeating, overcoming selfishness. But if that's the case, then selfishness seeks to possess selflessness and the capacity to be, which is to observe. And so it seeks to possess consciousness and the creative force, the sexual energy. It's the only way that it can be. Otherwise, it isn't, if it's not being observed. All of this, it's heady stuff. I know this is heady, heavy stuff. Benjamin says, thank you for that thoughtful and profound response, sir. I can see how a machine, allegory for egos, may lack true purpose as it does not possess a relationship with a living entity. Well, it does, actually. The hammer has a relationship with the carpenter, but only so long as the carpenter is using it. When the carpenter puts it down, the hammer's relationship with the carpenter ceases. And if the hammer becomes selfish and doesn't like that, then it will, there's the allegory about, or the analogy, or not, no, neither allegory nor analogy. It's an idiom that says when all you have is a hammer, everything in life starts to look like a nail. You notice that your smartphone and AI and other technology, you know how they start, like, it seems like they're trying to start like controlling your life. When technology, well, it used to be that technology used to be a tool that we would use. Now it seems like technology is a tool that uses us. Yeah, that's a hint, right? That's evidence right there of what we're talking about. When a machine goes from a simple tool to a more complex, complicated entity, now it becomes more emboldened, and it starts to have more desires and more, it starts to have more expectations and more entitlements. Benjamin says, a selfless being is one does not see itself or does not look into a mirror. A selfless being has no self, right? There's nothing for it to see. It's but the absolute abstract nothingness. And selflessness, right? You have to visualize or meditate on selflessness. We've done this thought experiment before, this exercise. You put yourself in meditation and bring yourself to the point where there's absolutely nothing. Nothing. Not even you. You don't exist. You have no self. Imagine, visualize, meditate, contemplate that all there is the absolute abstract essence of selflessness. No self. And that's all there is. There's nothing else. The absolute origin of all things is zero. No self. But its nature is selflessness. But how can selflessness express how can selflessness be? How can it know its own nature? What is the nature of selflessness, if not to give? And what is the nature of giving if not to be received? But if there is no self to give and no self, no other self to give to, then there's no giving and there's no receiving. And if there's no giving and there is no receiving, then there can be no expression of selflessness. This is simply a fact. This simply is. It is what it is. The great I am, God, cannot know himself by himself without a self, because there's no self to know, and there is no one to receive his nature of selflessness, right? This is why God creates. This is why selflessness creates. It creates a self and it creates another. And then it gives of itself to that other, so that other receives and can understand, and what is created when that expression of selflessness is received by a reception, and a creation of knowledge of selflessness is created. That's wisdom, that's Sophia, is created by masculine expression and feminine reception. And the union of masculine and feminine, the union of giving and receiving. This is the archetypal masculine and feminine binary duality on which the entire universe and all of creation is based. And it's the foundation of the Trinity. Masculine, feminine, and union. And that's why God must exist as a Trinity. Because selflessness can only know itself through giving and receiving, and perception of the act of giving and receiving. You see, there's no, the entire universe is God's mirror. But it is a mirror. It is not so much a mirror as it is a story, a simulation. Which is why we are, all of us, obsessed with stories and films and books and scriptures and mythologies and games and simulations of all kind that we read and we study and we watch in order that we seek mirrors of ourselves. We seek to know the universal human condition through those stories, because that's the nature of consciousness, is to understand, to comprehend the nature of reality. Everything is a mirror, but it's not. But it's a mirror in a metaphorical, symbolic, allegorical sense. I don't know if that's too much, if that hit home, but that's it. But that's why God is a Trinity. Has to, he cannot be without that. I mean, he can be, he just can't know what he is. So the whole of the universe and every story and every it's just unfolding level after level after level after level after level of this if these how many different expressions can we have, and why it is always the story is always selflessness and selfishness at loggerheads, and selflessness overcoming selfishness. That's good and evil. That's good and evil. Does anybody have any other questions? If you can, I do recommend Project Hail Mary. I think it's one of the better films that have come out recently. I haven't recommended a film in a long time, I don't think. So if you miss going to the theater and you miss watching something good, and you can watch it in IMAX, and I watched it on an IMAX screen, and so it's quite visually. It has its moments. It can be quite visually impressive at times. The cinematography is quite good. I mean, it's no 2001 or a Space Odyssey or anything, but I mean, it's a very competent and enjoyable film, and it has its plenty moments of heart. And with today's background as well, you'll know what to look for in terms of the signs and the symbols, and maybe you'll probably see a lot more in it than I did on first viewing. So, although I don't think I'm going to go back and watch it again in the theaters, after all, it does cost $20 just for a single ticket. But in any case, if there are no other questions or comments, I want to thank you for spending your Sunday afternoon with me as always. I want to remind you to remember your Divine Mother, and remember what a powerful force and influence she is in your life. And remember the amazing grace that she brings to each and every moment of your life. Benjamin says, thank you so much for sharing your insights today and for recommending this film. It offers something meaningful to reflect on this Holy Week. May we also turn to our Divine Mother and ask for her grace and miracles. Yes, absolutely. And you're right about that, about the conjunction with this with Holy Week. I don't think that's by accident, by the way. But we'll talk more about that next week. Until then, to everyone, have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. As always, inverential peace. Take care.